else, because both my mom and I have been really big fans of you for a long time.
Cool.
Okay, count me down from 5, please.
Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Hi guys, Bradley Dillon here for the newfury.com, and we're at State Theater in St. Pete, Florida. We're here for a really awesome show today. Here with my friends in Jars of Clay, who, if you've never seen them live, you really need to. So why don't you introduce yourself and what you do in the band, and also what band you play.
Sure.
Everybody knows.
Sure. Do you want to? Excuse me.
It's okay.
My name is Charlie Lowell, and I play piano and keys in Jars of Clay.
Alright, so first question for you. Back in '95 when you released your self-titled debut album, that was huge for you guys. It didn't take 2, 3, 4 albums like it does a lot of bands. It just instantly happened for you guys. Your song "Flood" was one of the biggest crossover hits from that really bridged the gap between Christian music and the secular audience. What do you think made the song connect to so many different listeners and stuff like that?
It's hard to quantify it, but I think a lot of songs like that come out of nowhere and sort of rise to the charts are all about timing. And I think that song hit at a time when we were all kind of tired of grunge, and so it has that sort of angst in it that grunge did, but it has this sort of hopeful acoustic with violins and cellos in it, and so I think in that time these loops and these cellos were kind of fresh to the ears, and we were a new band that we didn't have any, people didn't know much about us, so I think there's a real mystery when that happens, and that song just connected.
Alright, now for those who aren't familiar, can you tell us a little bit more about what the Blood Water mission does?
Yeah, Blood Water started almost 10 years ago now. We took a trip to Africa, and we'd been learning a little bit about AIDS in Africa, and we saw this connection between the lack of clean water and AIDS, because AIDS destroys the immune system. So if you're drinking river water that has parasites and animal feces and horrible things in it, it's destroying the immune system and killing people quicker than AIDS would on its own, and as well, dirty water is the #1 killer of children under 5. If they get diarrhea, in most cases they die from it. Something completely treatable for us, looks completely different in Africa. So we started Blood Water to help raise funds to build clean water wells and to give support to HIV and AIDS care in sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah, it's really amazing that as a band we're able to bring attention to that sort of non-profit thing. When you guys are on tour, have you ever worked with any other non-profit agencies and stuff like that on tour and stuff like that?
We have a little bit. We've been doing Blood Water now for 8 or 9 years, so when we can, we really focus on that and try not to spread our message too thin, but we've done some tours that have partnered with Habitat for Humanity before, and we really have a high view of what they do. We've been on some builds where we actually help build houses for lower income families, and they're a wonderful organization with great people, and they bring in the community and get everybody involved in a way that I think is really healthy and sustainable. That's probably the main one.
What would you say your ultimate mission statement is as a band?
I think it's to, we've sort of come around to this in the last couple of years, but I think it's to help cultivate a space where people can dialogue and engage sort of the messiness of their lives. Like we have our work, and we have our family, and we have our church, if we have a church, and we have friends, and all these different pieces of life that all require energy and time and effort, and it's really hard to integrate them. And I think it's gotten harder over the years as we're busier and we're more connected to our devices and less connected to people around us. So I think if we can do one thing well in our music, it's to be honest about that and to help maybe put words to some of those struggles and questions that people have about it. Songs that deal with the idea of connection or a lack of connection. That's sort of a thread that runs throughout our history.
Speaking, struggles and putting that to music, you guys are putting out a new album, Inland, on the 27th. What are some of the lyrical themes from that album? What sort of things are you touching on?
Well, some of them are like I just described. They are talking about sort of this moment of life where, like there's one called Fall Asleep that really is about being present and awake to the moment, and not wanting to either hold on to it so tight and carry it with us, or be thinking too far ahead that we can't enjoy the moment that we're in right now, which I think is actually really quite tricky. Some of them are more reflective, sort of talking about youth and looking back on who we were before, who we've sort of grown up from. We like to say that we started in college when we knew everything, because when you're in college you kind of feel like you know everything. And now we're 20 years later and we know just a couple things. So we joke about this sort of undoing, as you go through life, you're less and less sure of a lot of things and you're more sure about a few core things. So Steve said recently that Inland is about the not knowing more than it is about the knowing.
All right, now, 20 years is a long time to be in the music industry.
Yeah.
Even a quarter of that is a huge accomplishment for anyone. When you guys dropped out of college to move to Nashville and do the music thing, were you scared? Were you intimidated by it? What were you thinking when you did that?
We were certainly young and naive. We were our second year into college and we'd won this competition. So we did have some interest. We didn't know where that would lead, but we kind of had this excuse we used, at least I think, as a parachute, and we certainly told our parents, if it doesn't work out, we can go back in the fall. So the end of the semester in the spring, we're going to Nashville, see what happens over the summer, and we can always re-enroll in the fall. And of course we didn't, and there was a lot of interest, and we stuck around and cut that first record, and things, like you said, took off pretty quickly.
When you were touring for that first album cycle, you toured with everyone from PFR to secular bands like Matchbox 20, Sting,
Right.
I can't remember other bands, but all those bands are huge deals. What were some of the differences between touring with secular artists rather and Christian artists, or what kind of differences are there?
Well, the obvious ones, like a PFR tour would be more in churches and gymnasiums, colleges. Matchbox tour is more in venues like this, like clubs and bars. So those are inherently pretty different places to be in. I think what we learned early on with playing in the mainstream and going to mainstream radio stations was that there's a lot of walls people put up when you walk in the room. If they know you're a Christian, they put up all these walls because they've had some weird experiences with the church, or maybe they're just not sure what to think and they're intimidated, or they think you have an agenda coming in. And we really didn't. We tried to not have an agenda. We love music. We love playing for people. We really didn't come in with any sort of religious agenda or burden on our shoulders. So what we found early on was just to talk about the music that we loved. Talk about Radiohead, or talk about growing up on the Beatles or Zeppelin. Relate to people, find common areas that you can relate. And that's the same thing we would do with Matchbox or the Samples or Sting, 30 seconds when we got it. But I think because of this sort of baggage with the idea of being a Christian, we try to, in some ways, normalize that a little bit by saying, hey, firstly, we're humans. We're human, and we kind of deal with all the same stuff you do in life, but we have this belief system that's part of how we look at the world and how we behave. And that doesn't make us aliens. Just defines how we make decisions, I guess.
You mentioned Radiohead. That's one of my personal favorite bands.
Sure.
And you guys have been around almost as long as they have. It's pretty crazy to think about. What's your favorite Radiohead album?
Mine is probably OK Computer because of the timing. We were on our second record in London when they started playing Paranoid Android on BBC, so we heard it in a little cabbie in London. So that's very magical, and obviously that record was a very redefining record for them. There's a few songs in Kid A that I love, Videotech, and some of the other ones lose me a little bit. I haven't followed it quite as closely as some of my bandmates, but yeah.
Alright, so I remember back in '06 when you put out your album Good Monsters, which is actually my favorite Jars of Clay record. It got ridiculously good reviews from just about everyone, and a lot of critics put it even above your self-titled album as far as some of their favorites. What kind of lyrics and themes went into the record? Because when people think of monsters, they think about the physical monsters and then maybe monsters inside themselves.
Yeah. Well, that's the image we wanted to convey, and it really those songs and those themes came out of what we were learning in our lives, in our personal lives. We were learning a lot about the duality and how easy it is to project who you want people to see in you, depending on who you're around. And I think the road, and I think the perceptions of a Christian band only multiply that sort of temptation to set up two different Charlies. And if I'm around you, I'll be one Charlie. And if I'm around these people, I'm a different Charlie. It's such an unhealthy thing for anyone to have it to sort of set up. So we were learning through our communities and our friends and marriages that isolation, sort of leads to that duality. And so we wrote songs like Work. Do you know what I mean when I say I don't want to be alone? Songs like Good Monsters, where inside of me is the capacity to do great good and great destruction in the same person. It's not two different people. It's housed within the same person. So those are some of the ideas that were really coming alive for us in that season, as well as some of the Bloodwater work. So you have songs like Oh My God and Light Gives Heat. They were really informed by these really stout experiences and new relationships in Africa.
Alright, now, when you, Adrian Belew from King Crimson, that's something a lot of people know about you, that he produced the Liquid and Flood off your first album. What was it like working with him? Because, that's amazing to have someone that influential in the progressive rock genre. Yeah,
it was amazing. In some ways, he was very different than I expected. His music is so eclectic and experimental, and he ended up being this very down-to-earth family guy, almost a little quiet and introverted, and not very strange or odd in person at all. So it took us a while to let down our guard, and he was our first producer we'd really worked with, and he was I think like a distant relation to a girl on a record label. He had just moved to Nashville, was wanting to sort of get into the community, and she said, would you be willing to check out this demo? Would you be willing to work with this band? And I would say that the most incredible thing about it was that he did not want to put his, even to a fault maybe, he didn't want to put his Adrian stamp on our music. He wanted to help us be the best that we could be, so it was even more Jars than we could come up with on our own. Find out what's good about us and make it even stronger. And I think in some ways we probably wanted some like Adrian weirdness, and he was like, that's not the producer's job. That's sort of a self-serving agenda that he refused to bring. So he was great, and he plays a little bit of guitar on our new record as well. We kind of came back around and said, you've been a part of our story for 20 years. Would you be willing to put some guitar down on the first track on the record?
Now, being you guys have released so many songs, so many albums, if you can think back the last 20 years, what was the most difficult album?
They're difficult for different reasons. Some of them are hard to write, some of them are hard. Our third record, If I Left the Zoo, was a hard creative process. Working with our producer was hard, but great stuff came out of it, but it was not easy. We spent probably 6 months in Oxford, Mississippi in the heat of summer, working with him, and long days and touring on the weekends, and we were all newly married. So that record just feels to me like it was difficult. Like we really worked hard on it. It didn't come easily. And then The Long Fall Back to Earth was a difficult record, and just in different ways, you know. It's like a family, you go through different seasons of relating to one another easily or more difficult. They all have different sort of attachments with them.
All right, so you know, a lot of bands are doing the anniversary thing. You know, 10th anniversary, 5th anniversary, 20th anniversary.
Yeah.
What bands would you like to see come back and do which albums, or they can still be around, but what do you want to see as a fan?
Cool question. Shoot. I mean, I'm a Tears for Fears fan from growing up. They're doing a little bit of stuff. It's, you know, some of that's so hard. You want new experience then, and 20 years have passed. You know, even for us. Tears for Fears is more like 40 years or something. You know. So I'm trying to think who. I'm having trouble picking a record. I mean, my favorite artists are probably Arcade Fire. They're still making great music. Feist, the Canadian artist, she's a real favorite of mine. You know, your U2s and Coldplays. They're all still putting out new music. So I have to think on that one.
Okay. So, oh yeah, you guys have been around since as long as the internet has. How have you used the internet and social media to connect more with your fans? And what kind of drawbacks and benefits are there from that?
Well, I mean, the only drawbacks would be that it requires more time and energy. But I would say in most cases it's very rewarding. There's not barriers between your fans and you anymore. And I think for us, we've got amazing fans that have walked with us for 15, 20 years. And they have incredible stories to share with us about how certain songs met them at certain seasons in their life and carried them, or put words to what they were thinking or feeling, challenge them, and we get to hear that stuff through social media. We get to, there's just more interaction, and I think for the most part we like that, and occasionally it gets, you know, burdensome or too much, but for the most part we welcome it and appreciate it. So the fact that people don't have to write like fan mail to a label that gets sent to your manager, or it gets sent to you and you get it like 16 months later or something. I'm fine without any of that. You know, it's like this direct fan to band thing for the most part, I think is win-win for bands and the audience.
Alright, so you know, when you guys are doing headlining tours, especially with so many albums out, how do you pick a set list?
It's hard. We start with the songs that we say we would get run out of town if we didn't play them. So your Flood, your Dead Man, Liquid, songs like this, and we go from there. You know, we do a few new songs. So we have a new record coming out, and then we pick songs that make moments out of the set. You know, dynamics, a really low moment, a really interactive fan moment, a song that you can sing along to. We just try and piece it together and make it interesting.
Alright, well, do you have anything you'd like to tell your fans, friends, family, that before we wrap this up?
Just that, you know, Inland comes out in a few days, and we're super excited. We say it's taken us 20 years to write this record, because these are songs we couldn't have written when we were 20 or even 30. So we're grateful for fans sticking by us, and we really hope that there's songs that connect and really come to life and the new stuff.
Alright, thank you guys for watching this interview. Be sure to check out Jars to Play the rest of the summer on their headlining tour, and check out this interview and more at newfury.com. Later.
Thanks, Brent.